So next up we have Yankho Banda. Yankho studied at the University of Witwatersrand and completed a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering, BSc Eng with Honours in Civil Engineering in 2011. She has over 9 years full-time work experience where she predominantly focused on traffic and transportation, employment creation and development, as well as roads and stormwater projects. She has done evaluations and simulations for technical memos and traffic impact assessments. Yankho is currently pursuing a master's degree in engineering in transport studies at the University of Cape Town. Thanks, Yankho.
Thank you very much, Renee, and thank you to the Western Cape CESA YPF for this opportunity. Similar to Shaham's presentation, I also have a few animations. So some of them, if I say next, just keep going. Okay, next slide, please. So the main thing that I'll be talking about is the interview journey. So from when you submit, what will transpire to the point of when you get called. So the topics that I'll cover, I won't do the introduction because Renee has done that. I'll delve a bit into the type of correspondences that you will receive from the Engineering Council of South Africa. And then I'll touch a bit on the two processes that Shaham also indicated, and how they fit into the interview, what type of interviews those two processes get called for, either one or both. And then I'll just give some pointers on how to go about preparing your presentation when you get called for the professional review, as well as some do's and don'ts for the interview preparation, as well as when you're actually undergoing the interview. And then second last, I'll just discuss after the whole interview process, what are the outcomes that one should expect, and then just a word of encouragement. Next slide, please. Okay, this one I'll skip because Renee has already done it. Skip, please. Okay, so in terms of the correspondences that you'll receive, so once you send through your application to the Engineering Council of South Africa, you will receive, they will basically go through, or they will say, they'll send an email to say that we've received your application. If there's certain information that is missing, they will let you know that certain information is missing. So for example, with my application, when I submitted, I physically took my application there, but the referee reports were still coming. So I received communication to say that my application is missing referee reports. I have so many days to get them in, after which I will have to redo the whole application. So it is very key to note that in terms of the referee report, the onus is on you to make sure that your referee's reports get to the council. So hence, if you go through the forms, there's always an information sheet after almost all the forms, which explains what are the requirements. It will tell you that you need to send your referees, what is it, like those envelopes with the stamp, so that they can just put it in and get it to the council for you. But you just need to follow up and ensure that they're submitted timelessly. So if you are in Gauteng like myself, what I did is that I spoke to my referees and I told them that whenever they're ready, they can close the envelope, seal it. I'll organize a driver from work to come get it, and then I'll have it delivered there. So there are many avenues one can follow to make sure that by the time they submit everything, you've done everything. And by making sure that you submit everything at the same time, it will ensure that your application from the start to finish goes through seamlessly. So once you've submitted, one of the first emails you'll get is an email acknowledging that they have received your application for whatever category. So in my case, professional engineering category. And if everything is fine, they will also tell you that everything in terms of the administrative work, so just saying that you have submitted all the forms, have received all the referee reports, is fine. Now the process is going to start. Next slide, click please. After that, as I indicated, you'll get an email where they say that all your admin is okay, and will attach a letter which will explain what are the processes that will be undertaken and the durations or the rough estimates as to how long those processes will take. So in my case, the acknowledgement admin is okay email had a letter that explained that now that they've done all the administrative checks, the steps that will be followed is that now my application is going to the experience appraisal review. From that, the moderators will give an income. Additional information will be requested, or I may be called for an EA interview, or I'll just go straight to the PR review. And then what would roughly be the requirements at the PR review? After the PR review, the moderators will then also give their comments, after which a final decision will be made. Next. So after that email, so as I explained the process, the next email that then I got was to say that everything in terms of the experience appraisal, which Shaham explained, is that documentation, review of the documentation. I was then called to the professional review interview. So then I also got an email saying everything is fine. This is the date for my interview. So the key thing here that I'd like to highlight is that always read all the correspondence from ECSA timelessly. Make sure that the email you put on your is an email that you check regularly, and is an email that can is not full, so that some emails are going to bounce or whatever not. Next point, please. Renee. Renee.
Hi.
Hi, sorry, I was busy saying click, so nothing was happening.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Okay, yeah. So obviously then after your interview, you will then get an email which will say what is the outcome. And obviously most of us are always looking forward to the email from ECSA that says, ECSA is pleased to inform you that da. So the key thing that I wanted to highlight with the correspondence is that read all the correspondences you receive from ECSA very carefully. And the reason why I say that, I'll highlight it a bit further on in the presentation, why I say that read all the correspondence carefully. Next slide, please. Okay, I think there's a bit of a lag on my side.
Yankho, are you seeing
Okay.
your
So as indicated, yeah, no, I think there's, yeah, I am, but I think there's a bit of a lag. But I can see it, just that when I say next slide, it's taking a bit of a while to come up, but it's fine. So as indicated, there are two steps that will be followed, and even Shaham indicated that there's a step called experience appraisal, and there's a step called professional review between these two processes. So the first phase that all applications go through is the experience appraisal. So as Shaham also indicated, this is a documentary assessment of competence. So this is just the reviewers and the assessors basically going through all your training and experience. Have you satisfactorily demonstrated the 11 outcomes, competence in the 11 outcomes? If you do not demonstrate competence in the 11 outcomes, what will then happen is that under this experience appraisal stage, you will receive communication from the Engineering Council where they either request more information or they request that you attend an interview to get more information from you. So this interview, you do not need to prepare presentation. It's more like a dialogue where the peer reviewers will be asking you questions just to try fill in the gaps. So the panel is made up of 3 reviewers. If you do not have 3 reviewers in the interview, they need to ask you first if you are comfortable with if you are not comfortable, you are allowed to say no, and then that interview has to be rescheduled, because by having 3, if one can be like a tiebreaker, it's just to make sure that when a decision is made, it is a final. So if you have 2 and they both differ, then it could delay, getting the final process. So you have a right, if there are no 3 peer reviewers, to request that they need to ask you, and you have a right to say no if you're not comfortable with that. So based on your experience appraisal, whether they requested more information or you are requested to attend an experience appraisal interview, you'll basically have 2 outcomes. Either from this outcome, you'll be declined, meaning you'll be refused registration, professional status registration, and then you'll be put into a period called abeyance. But when you are declined, basically it's just the different options. I'll explain a bit later in the presentation. One just allows you to obtain the necessary experience in the outcomes that you are lacking competence in, but without having to pay the fee if you obtain it within that required period. And the other outcome is that if from the experience appraisal interview, you are able to gaps, then you'll be allowed to proceed to the PR interview stage. So the professional review or PR interview stage, this is an integrative assessment of your competence. By integrative, because it's indicated in the way you are presenting and showing your competence. So when you get to this stage, it means that you passed your EA stage, it's key to highlight here that not everybody will go through the EA stage. You don't have to go through the EA stage. If your documentation, your written documentation adequately demonstrates different outcomes, you will go straight to the PR review interview. However, if your documentation does not adequately demonstrate that competence and additional information is required, when you get to the PR interview stage, it would mean that you then demonstrated a competence during your EA interview or request for more information stage of the EA stage. And likewise with this, when you have your PR interview, the panel will be made up of 3 peer reviewers. So again here, if there are 2 peer reviewers, they need to ask you if you are comfortable and allowing them to proceed. And if you're not comfortable, you have a right to refuse, and they have to reset and make sure that the council has to reset and make sure that they have 3 peer reviewers to interview you. And as indicated, with the professional review, you have to prepare a 15-minute PowerPoint presentation to demonstrate competence in the 11 outcomes. And from this, once that whole process has been done, you've done your interview, you've done your Q&As, from this, you'll also get 2 outcomes. Either you'll get the nice email that says, ECSA is pleased to inform me that you've been approved, blah, 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 or you'll be declined. And based on the decline, it'll also give you reasons why you are declined. Where are you lacking to demonstrate the competence? Next slide, please. Apologies, I think there's a lag on my side, so I have to wait a bit for it to catch up. Okay, so in terms of the presentation, I think just click until you get to the end because it seems there's a delay. So in terms of the presentation, as indicated, when you get to the professional review, that is when you need to do a presentation. So it is advisable that your presentation, you spend 20% of your time, as indicated, it's a 15-minute presentation. So you spend 20% of your time, which is about 3 minutes, introducing yourself, giving an overview of your overall training experience as well as your work experience. And then the other 80% of your time, which is about 13 minutes. Okay, that's the last point after there, Renee. Don't click again. There's one more point and then don't click again. The other 80%, which is about 13 minutes of your time, you need, that's where now you using 1 or 2 recent projects. Usually it's advisable that use the projects that you discussed in your engineering report, because that's the one where you telling that story and you are also indicating which outcomes were you meeting with each project or the 2 projects that you are discussing. So at most also, try keep it to 2 projects. Otherwise, you could run out of time trying to demonstrate trying to demonstrate competence in the 11 outcomes. So it's key to also note that there is no specific format. So when you receive that email to say that you are being called for the PR interview, don't waste time trying to find a template. There is no template. You have leeway to prepare it the way you see fit. So don't be afraid to use a bit of color, make it a bit bright, make it be a reflection of who you are. So my recommendation is that Once you've prepared, you'll have one slide for the introduction, one slide outlining your experience, maybe have a slide just giving a brief background of the project or projects you are going to discuss, then go into the 11 outcomes. It is recommended that you have a slide per outcome, maximum where maybe some outcomes you need to give a bit more detail, no more than 2 slides. Once you start having more than 2 slides, it kind of shows that chances are you're going to waffle and you will not be able to demonstrate or show that competence adequately. So try limit 1 slide per outcome, 2 at most. Try have bullet points as far as is feasibly possible. Someone's mic is off or someone's mic is on. I'm getting feedback. So try put bullet points instead of having a wordy presentation. Having a wordy presentation, you are now you want to read everything. So that is actually gonna derail you from just getting to the point. The whole idea is that you need to be communicating clearly.
Yankho? Sorry, Yankho, your mic has been muted.
So they muted me.
Sorry.
Okay, where did you lose me? So that's about the bullet points. So I was saying that rather when you have your presentation, don't make it wordy. Rather just have bullet points and then you talk to the points. So this will help in making sure that you get straight to the point, you're not waffling. And what I've noticed is that when you have too many words or when you've written sentences, you are tempted to read everything verbatim. And if you miss something, you feel like you're missing critical things. But you must remember that 15 minutes goes by very quickly, so you don't have that luxury. So rather bullet point and talk to certain points. And as indicated, you can use pictures. Sometimes you don't even need to put words. Just put pictures that can demonstrate what you want to talk about and then rather explain using the imagery, because sometimes it's also quite good to give people a visual picture of what you are trying to explain. Sometimes, depending on what you are doing, you can include calculations, but it is usually advisable that have a pen and paper with you there, and then if a certain question is asked and you need to do a calculation, at least you can now do the calculation to demonstrate what it is that you want during the Q&A session. Another key thing also to note when you do your interview, you feel free to ask the interviewers or the reviewers to allow you to present uninterrupted up until the end, because you are cognizant that 15 minutes is limited. So if they keep interrupting you, those interruptions are counting into your 15 minutes. So you might not get to the end. So feel free before you commence to say that I appreciate that I'm given the opportunity to go through my presentation, being aware that 15 minutes is very limited, and I'll field all questions at the end. You're allowed to do that. When writing, even from preparing your reports, but also at the interview, talk about what you did. This is not a team effort. Yes, you have other people helping you, but this is your PR interview. This is your PR. It's not mine and Renee's PR. So it's always about, I was responsible for this. I did that. I made this decision. I took that, or if something went wrong, I was responsible to fix it in this way and that way. So it's always about what you did, not what we did on a project. That's why even if you read the forms, it always says highlight what you were responsible for, because it's you taking the onus and saying, I'm the custodian of what I'm presenting here. And then, as the other speakers also indicated, there's different categories. So we have engineers, technicians, and technologists. Make sure that when you speak to your problems, they are pitched at the right level. So complex engineering problems for engineers, broadly defined problems for technologists, and clearly defined problems for technicians. There's a very thin line between technologists and engineers, but yeah, I think by reading the forms, you will then be able to understand to what degree are they expecting you to be solving the problems for your category. Always ensure you act within the code of conduct. So what this means is that I myself am a traffic engineer. When that certificate comes, it doesn't say you are a professional civil engineer. in transportation engineering. The certificate just says you're a professional engineer. So the onus is on you to know where your limitations are. So as a transport or a transport engineer, but predominantly working in the traffic engineering and transportation planning, I cannot sign off on a structural engineering drawing because I haven't developed the acumen of a person who's been practicing as a structural engineer. So always ensure that you are acting within your code of conduct. Don't act outside your mandate, because then that also speaks to one of the outcomes, which is acting ethically. If you're going to be acting nilly-willy, then it shows that you are not giving, like you can put society at risk, and that is not what the council wants. You must remember that the whole point also of registering is that you are saying you are being a custodian of the profession, but in essence, it's to protect society from us as engineers. It's to make sure that whatever we're putting out there is safe for use and it is safe for the society that we are serving. So someone needs to be held accountable if something goes wrong. So it's a huge responsibility, ladies and gentlemen, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. Also, when preparing for your interview, do not use random examples or things that you didn't do. As the first speaker indicated, the danger in this is that if you get asked a question and you can't answer, already it speaks to the type of character that you have, or your type of character. So you don't want to do that. So don't use random examples and don't add things that you are not sure of. Speak of things that you know you can stand for them. If they ask you, even if you have a debate, you can stand your ground on that particular point. And then from assisting quite a number of people and discussing with some colleagues, all the 11 outcomes are important, but I think where a lot of people are failing are mainly in the Group A outcomes, which is the outcomes 1, 2, and 3. And these refer to identifying a root cause. So I know one of the questions was, how do you demonstrate this competence? For example, if you're in an area where there are sinkholes, your root cause is not the fact that you're having sinkholes, because Ekurhuleni has sinkholes, Carltonville has sinkholes. The root cause is what is causing those sinkholes. So for example, in Ekurhuleni, maybe the material is predominantly dolomite, and then in Carltonville, the material is silty, sandy material. So if you have water that is standing, that is your root cause. The reason why you're having sinkholes, let's say in Ekurhuleni, is because you have water standing, and dolomite and water do not mix because it's clay soil. As soon as clay gets water, it heaves. So that is your actual problem. Your problem is not that you're having sinkholes. The problem is that you're having water. So now what is your solution? The solution is to remove the water as quickly as possible off the road into a drainage system. So that is how you demonstrate competence in the Group A outcomes. So it's key to know what is the root cause. Don't just look on the surface. Even if a client, for an example, in my case, I'm a traffic person. A client might come and say, no, we have congestion here. Yes, you have congestion. The client has told you this is the problem. But you might find that in solving your problem, maybe there's only one entrance in and out. So your problem won't be solved by you, let's say, adding lanes or increasing the cycle time. It's actually you trying to find an alternative route to divert those the vehicles that are passing through a certain intersection. So that is what is meant by identifying a root cause. And then the other outcomes where a lot of candidates also do not adequately demonstrate their outcomes are the Group C outcomes, which is outcomes 6 and 7. And these are all about identifying your risks beforehand and putting in place mitigations that can be, so it's about minimizing risks basically and adhering to the regulations. So here, this is where construction regulations are quite important, because now all the OHS things are there. And Group C outcomes try to make you cognizant of the fact that no matter how small a change you are bringing in, every engineering solution does have an impact on the environment, on society, and. So you need to be aware of that. You cannot say, I was just doing a small diversion here. Your small diversion will have an impact somehow, some way. So outcome C, it is important that you demonstrate that to minimize this risk, this is what was done. Simple example on site, the wearing of PPE. It's you saying, I understand that this environment is dangerous, but to minimize someone being in an accident, we'll give a reflector vest. We'll make you wear safety boots so that if heavy material fall, at least the injury will not be as severe, and. And then the other outcome where a lot of candidates don't seem to do so well are the Group D outcomes, which are basically 8, 9, and 10. And this is about accepting responsibility and acting ethically. As indicated, it's about what you did, not what we did as a team. So it's about you saying, I made a decision because on 1, 2, 3, and it's just trying to show your thought process basically. And in terms of acting ethically, it's you using the guidelines, even you consulting your peers or your supervisors just to get a sense of where are you acting within your bounds? Are you maybe overstepping somewhere and doing things that shouldn't be done? So that is how sometimes you can demonstrate that you are acting ethically and you are taking responsibility for the decisions or the designs that you are bringing out or whatever it is that you are trying to demonstrate. And then what I find quite nice is that time permitting though, is that it's nice to highlight some lessons that you have learned or picked up throughout your professional journey. For example, in my space, one of the lessons I've learned is the importance of undertaking site visits, because from that you get to engage the local community and find out certain things that a desktop study might not make immediately visible to you. So if you have time, you can have a slide where you just highlight some lessons that you have learned. And another point I'd like to indicate, ladies and gentlemen, is that even if something went wrong, if it went wrong and you learned something, don't be ashamed to say that this happened and this went wrong, but this is what you learned. Because when through failure, sometimes that is how we learn. And it shows that you are ethical enough to admit that something went wrong and you are responsible enough to, you are ethical enough to take responsibility for something going wrong and putting in the mitigations to rectify that. Next slide, please. So in terms of the interview dues, now you are called for the interview. So because I'm a traffic engineer, we have green lights going. One of the first things you need to remember, I know your nerves will be all over the place, but please, ladies and gentlemen, do not forget your identification, whether it be an ID, your passport, or a driver's license. So because we're doing this online, I did the process online. Before you proceed, they will ask you to put up your identification just for them to verify your ID number, your name, and so forth, and that it is you who is actually coming in for the interview. And as indicated, when you get called to the professional review, you do need to, it's a must, you must prepare a 15-minute presentation. This is not just you discussing. Presentation is a must. Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot stress enough practicing. Practice, practice, practice. You have no idea how quickly 50 minutes can go past. So make sure you know what is coming up. You can explain certain things fairly quickly. Also pick up what are some of which slides can you maybe go through very quickly, and which slides then can you take those maybe 30 seconds that you've sort of like eliminated, add on to another slide or outcomes to better illustrate those competencies for those outcomes. Any work that you do that is voluntary, whether it's outside the industry or within the industry, it is good to highlight that. And this also includes undertaking postgraduate studies. It is also good to highlight certain postgraduate studies that you are doing, because postgraduate studies, with some of them, especially if you're doing a research master's, for example, you need to, do this, you need to research the material, you need to, decide what material you're going to use for your final write-ups and whatever not. So there, just doing that is also some outcomes, like I think it's outcome 2, because you have a whole lot of options that you need to trim and come up with like 2 or 3 that you want to then discuss. So do not underestimate how postgraduate studies can also help you in demonstrating competence of the 11 outcomes. And even voluntary work, like volunteering for an organization like CESA, you are engaging with different professionals. You are hosting certain positions. So it's showing that you have the competence, to engage and demonstrate certain things. Understand the construction regulations. If something is unclear in the interview, ask for clarity. It is okay to not know something because it might be outside your scope. And I always advise that prepare a minimum of 2 questions which you can ask at the end. To help minimize your nerves, think of this as a peer conversation. As much as they are assessing you, you can learn something from them as well. Next one, please, Renee. And then for the don'ts, as indicated with the other ones, don't come unprepared. Do not have too much text on your presentation. Bullet point everything. Do not put things that are outside of your professional scope, because you will trip on yourself. Do not include work that is not yours. And sometimes listen to the question. Don't be so quick to respond. If something is unclear, sometimes ask. So Renee, what you are saying is, it is making sure that you're getting Renee's question properly and you give the answer that you need to give. And don't be afraid to disagree, but it's how you disagree. Don't be banging tables. Just say, I beg to disagree on your point because of 1, 2, 3. So I'm saying to Renee, I acknowledge what you're saying, but this is my viewpoint. Next slide, please. I'm almost done, Renee. So as indicated with the professional review, there'll be 2 outcomes. Either you'll be declined or you'll be approved. Keep bulleting. Yeah. So with the decline, there are 2 types of declines as indicated. Either you'll be refused or you'll be put into abeyance. So when you are declined, they'll write a letter to you and they'll tell you which outcomes you are not demonstrating competencies in. And if you're given a refusal, it means that you did not demonstrate the competencies adequately, even from the EA stage. And you given time to meet or try do work that will make you cover the deficiencies. However, you submit a new application. Whereas with abeyance, the moderator believes that it is feasible for you to obtain the necessary evidence within 12 months. So they will sort of like freeze your application, give you a chance to get or fill in the gaps with the deficient outcomes and resubmit without repaying the fee, only if you submit within the 12-month period. Or you'll just get an approval to say you can register as a professional. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, this is my favorite thing that I discovered recently. It's called Aluta Continua, but now there's an additional note that I discovered, which is Victoria Asserta. So yes, it's a struggle for some of us to get this, but you know what? Victory is definitely certain. So even if you get declined, do not give up. Engage with people who have gotten it. Go through your whole reports again and try to see where were you not demonstrating the competencies. You will eventually get it. And sometimes even if it means redoing everything, it's okay. It's not about how you start, but it's about how you finish. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yankho. That was absolutely amazing.